Welcome back, everyone, to Everyday English Pod. Today, we're going to be trying to figure out, that tricky thing about decisions, right? Like balancing those gut feelings against the hard data.
It really is a balancing act, isn't it? I mean, whether you're running a whole company, just trying to get a product off the ground, or just trying to figure out what to do next in your own life.
Totally. And it might seem like it's all about picking one or the other. Like, is it intuition? Is it the numbers?
Right, but the thing is, usually the really successful decisions, those come when you find that sort of sweet spot right between the two.
Yeah.
And we're going to try and see how that actually plays out in real businesses.
That's exactly it. Like sometimes you just have this feeling about something, right? Even if the numbers don't seem to be backing it up at all.
Yeah.
And then other times you've got all this data staring you in the face, but something in your gut is just like, no way.
Yeah.
So today we're going to unpack this whole intuition versus data thing and see if we can pull out some useful takeaways.
That's the goal. Absolutely.
Okay, let's dive into this gut feeling thing for a bit. Those hunches we get, the quick ones, they can be surprisingly right on the mark.
Yeah, they often come from, years of experience.
Mm-hmm.
And you start picking up on those little cues that you won't see in a spreadsheet.
Totally. You're like, wait a minute, something's different here.
And what's really interesting is your intuition can pick up on these little shifts, right? Like changes in how people are feeling or those cultural trends that are just starting to bubble up, stuff that hasn't quite made it into the hard data yet. Like someone in marketing might just sense, hey, this ad campaign, it's not really hitting the right note with this group, even if like the initial click-through rates look fine.
That's a great example, but of course we can't just run with a hunch, right?
No, of course not.
We need those solid numbers. Those are crucial for backing up those feelings.
They really give you that firm ground to stand on.
You got to have something to back it up, yeah.
Absolutely. And, without that data, we risk letting all those biases creep in.
Right.
What feels right to us might just be because we like it that way, not because it's actually the smart move.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is the smartest way to go is to use both, especially when maybe the data we have isn't quite complete or it's a little old. In those situations, our gut can really help us fill in the gaps.
Exactly. But the flip side's true too, right? If we're only staring at those analytics all the time, we might miss those innovative ideas that come from just experience, from intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the best solutions, they don't fit neatly into a data point.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, okay, how do we actually do this, put this into practice? Seems like the first step is, getting that good data, those reliable numbers.
Right, got to start there.
Yeah.
But then the trick is to take that data and filter it through your own understanding, your experience. So use the data to inform your intuition, and then let your intuition guide how you make sense of that data.
So it's this back and forth, isn't it? It's not like a one-time thing.
Absolutely.
This needs constant attention.
It does. We got to constantly refine how we use those metrics and still be open to those less tangible signals. It's a never-ending process.
It is. Now, one idea that came up was having, regular check-in meetings, these review sessions.
Yeah.
Why are those helpful? Tell me more about that.
So imagine this. You've got this dedicated time, right, where you're not just looking at the numbers, you're also talking about those gut reactions that people have.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah.
That creates a space for a much richer conversation. Someone from sales might see like a little dip in a certain product line, and they have a feeling like, oh, maybe it's because of this new thing our competitor's doing, even if the market share data hasn't caught up yet.
Yeah.
So sharing that hunch along with the sales figures, that gives you a way more complete picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And then to get even more viewpoints, there was this suggestion of rotating team leads.
Oh, yeah.
How does that play into all of this?
Well, someone from marketing, right? They might flag a risk in the cost of acquiring new customers, just based on their experience with how well campaigns usually work. And that's a risk that a purely operations-focused leader might completely miss.
Yeah.
So rotating who's in charge, that brings in these totally different ways of looking at the same data.
And that can really help us challenge our own assumptions, which is always a good thing.
Absolutely.
Another point that came up was keeping track of how those instinct-based decisions play out compared to the data-driven ones.
Yeah, that's key. If you track both the data and the reasoning behind decisions over time, you might see some surprising patterns.
Yeah.
Like, Are our hunches better in product development than in marketing?
Mhm.
Is there one person whose instincts are super reliable in a specific area? Tracking this helps us get better at making those tough calls.
It makes a lot of sense. And to make this all a bit more concrete, we could use something like, a dashboard.
Oh yeah, dashboards are great. They give you that quick snapshot of the important numbers.
Right.
But what's just as important is logging why you made a certain decision, right? Was it a clear trend? A strong gut feeling? A mix of both? That transparency helps you look back and analyze your reasoning later.
Transparency is so important for learning and figuring out, okay, what worked here, what didn't.
Absolutely.
Totally. Now, how do we help those newer team members get good at this whole balance thing?
Yeah, that's the question.
There was this idea of training them to see those little signals in the data, the hints that aren't obvious right away.
Right. But it's also important to pair them up with those more seasoned colleagues who have a knack for intuitive thinking. They can learn a lot by seeing how these mentors factor in the less tangible stuff.
So it's about developing those analytical skills, but also that intuitive sense.
Exactly. You got to build up both sides, and that strengthens your team's ability to weigh both the hard facts and those gut-level insights.
And it seems like this approach, this blended approach, can make teams work together better too, right?
What's interesting is that when you value both data and intuition, it encourages people to be more open-minded. They feel more comfortable sharing their opinions, even if they're not purely based on numbers.
Yeah, and we all know diverse opinions, that's where good ideas come from.
Absolutely.
But we do have to watch out for potential downsides, like getting stuck in analysis paralysis.
That's a big one. Overthinking can totally kill opportunities. We get so caught up in the data that we miss the boat completely. And then on the flip side, only going with your gut with no data to back it up can lead you down the wrong path too.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how do we stay on track,
Yeah.
Finding that right balance, it sounds like a constant effort.
It is. It's about being flexible, being willing to adjust, and having the discipline to make sure we're not going too far in one direction or the other.
So if we keep seeing bad outcomes, that should be a big warning sign, right? Like maybe our balance is off.
Exactly. If we consistently make the wrong call, it might mean we're overemphasizing one approach and neglecting the other. Time to rethink the process.
Instead of waiting for a massive failure, we need to make those small adjustments as we go. Stay agile.
Precisely. Course correction is key.
Exactly. And to really bake this into how we operate, it seems like it should be part of our project guidelines.
Totally agree. Clear guidelines help everyone understand that we value both data and intuition in our decision-making.
Makes sense. Getting an outside perspective can be super helpful too, right?
Oh, yeah. Bringing in experts from time to time, that can give you a fresh look at how you make decisions. They might spot biases you haven't even considered.
Fresh pair of eyes, always good.
Always.
Okay, let's switch gears for a bit. We talked about reviewing those metrics, looking for trends and what customers are interested in.
Right.
Sometimes, even if the overall numbers look great, you might have a gut feeling like something's not quite right with this product feature or this particular customer group, they're not happy.
Yeah, that intuition can be super valuable.
Right.
Because it points out those areas where the data might be telling one story, but there's something deeper going on.
Exactly. Like the big picture might look rosy, but maybe certain customers are feeling left out or dissatisfied. Your intuition can pick up on those subtler issues.
For sure.
And to really understand those feelings, we talked about focus groups.
Yeah. Numbers can only tell you so much, right?
Right.
Focus groups can really help you understand how people are responding to your products emotionally. Those unspoken needs that your typical analytics won't pick up.
Totally. Getting that human element, that real-time feedback, it adds a whole new layer of understanding.
It does. And if we only follow the trends in the data, we risk losing that personal connection with our customers. Intuition can help us ask the right questions, the ones we wouldn't have thought of otherwise.
It's not just about the numbers, it's about understanding the why behind them.
That's it. And to get a really good view, you need to bring together people from different departments, look at the data, but also get that subjective feedback. Those different viewpoints help you come up with a stronger strategy.
And every department needs to understand that logic and instinct both have a role to play.
Exactly. We shouldn't see these as two separate things. They're both tools, and they work best together.
Yeah. The best decisions often come from using both your head and your gut.
Absolutely.
Showing examples of times when a gut feeling led to a big win, that can be really motivating too, right?
Oh yeah, those real-world stories show that numbers aren't everything. And it lets your team know that you value their creativity, their instincts, not just their ability to analyze spreadsheets.
It builds a culture that respects both the data people and the innovators.
It does. And that synergy helps you adapt faster when the market changes, when customer preferences shift. It's more nimble when we're using both sides of our brains.
Yeah, that makes sense. We also have to be really aware of our own biases, though, right?
Absolutely. You got to keep an eye on that. Make sure your personal opinions aren't overshadowing the facts. Setting up regular checks can help you see if your instincts are actually lining up with the results.
And having a group whose specific job it is to challenge those gut assumptions.
Oh yeah, that's important. It helps prevent groupthink. Having a team to play devil's advocate, that keeps you from getting too comfortable with how you've always done things. You want to encourage healthy debate, but still value those initial sparks of insight.
So it's a delicate balance, for sure. But acknowledging that both perspectives matter, that makes us stronger.
Definitely.
And how we communicate those decisions, those blended decisions to others, that's important too, right?
It is. It is. When you emphasize both the data and the creative process, it builds confidence with your stakeholders and partners. Being transparent about how you use both intuition and analysis shows them that you're not just following the crowd, you're actually thinking things through.
Right. It shows you're being deliberate.
Yeah.
Now, how do we capture those gut feelings, those instinctive thoughts before they disappear? That can be tricky.
It can be. Those initial gut reactions can be really valuable, but they can easily slip away if you're not careful.
You're like, wait, what was I just thinking?
Exactly.
We talked about having quick brainstorming sessions during those data reviews. Tell me more about that.
Okay, so picture this. You create this dedicated time where people can share their gut feelings before you dive into the numbers.
Yeah.
Because often we lose those initial creative ideas when we focus too much on the objective metrics right away.
Yeah.
It's about giving those initial feelings a voice.
That's a really good way to put it.
I remember one case, this casual suggestion during a data review. It led to a total redesign of a user interface. Engagement went way up. It just goes to show that sometimes those informal observations are more insightful than a big, long report.
Totally. And to make this a more regular thing, there was this idea of setting up instinct checkpoints at certain points in a project.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It encourages people to speak up about any feelings or perceptions they have, even if they don't have hard data to back it up yet. It just becomes a normal part of the process.
Yeah, I like that. Just encouraging everyone to jot down those gut feelings in a shared project document seems like a simple way to keep track too.
It is. It helps you spot those recurring themes, or even identify those people who have a knack for sensing problems early on.
And that kind of talent, that can be a huge asset.
Huge. Again, we're not saying data isn't important. It's essential.
Yeah.
But we're saying that some of the most valuable insights, they come from those less tangible cues. That's where innovation often happens, when you combine good analysis with those creative leaps.
It's about using both sides of the brain. But we also have to have a good attitude about mistakes, don't we?
That's important. How we view errors makes a big difference.
Yeah.
If people are afraid of being wrong, they might not share those gut feelings at all. We should treat intuitive errors as learning experiences, just like we do with analytical mistakes.
Right, because failure can teach us a lot.
It really can. It shows us our blind spots and helps us get better at dealing with risk and exploring new things.
Absolutely. And keeping track not just of the successes, but also those near misses. Like times when a gut feeling might have prevented a problem. That can be super insightful.
It can. Highlighting those times when informal insights save the day really reinforces how important they are. Over time, you start to see which hunches are more reliable and which ones need more validation.
And that helps us get better at recognizing patterns and figuring out how to blend logic with those trustworthy gut feelings.
Precisely. And as you get more confident in this combined approach, you might find you can make decisions faster and more efficiently without all the back and forth.
That's the goal, right? But we can't get complacent.
No, definitely not.
We can't rely too heavily on instinct either.
Right. Over-relying on your gut can lead to bias and errors. That's why you should always try to check those instincts against solid evidence whenever you can.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance between creative thinking and being objective. Now, what about the risk of relying too much on the data and maybe missing those subtle cues?
That's a big one. Companies that are all about big data, they can miss those shifts in the market. The cultural ones, the emotional ones. By the time the data catches up, it might be too late.
Right, so we need to be proactive, use our intuition to anticipate those trends before they show up in the numbers.
That's it. And this brings us to the idea of an early warning system, something that combines those early data points, those leading indicators, with human insights, those gut feelings.
That sounds like a really powerful combination. How would that work in practice?
It's about picking up on those soft signals, like what people are saying on social media or the feedback from informal user groups. Then you compare that to your regular data to see if it backs up your instincts or challenges them.
So you're looking at the information from different angles.
Exactly. This kind of hybrid approach helps you react faster and spot opportunities that others might miss. And you should be ready to change course quickly, even if the initial data looks good, but your gut tells you otherwise.
Sometimes those little anomalies are the early signs of a bigger trend.
Exactly. But we have to be careful not to chase every little thought that pops into our heads. Having a structured way to evaluate those hunches is key. Brainstorming's great, but you should focus on the ideas that seem most likely to have a real impact and look at them from both a qualitative and a quantitative perspective to see if they're actually feasible.
Timing is also a huge factor, right?
Absolutely. Sometimes your intuition might be spot on, but the market's just not ready for it yet. We've seen great concepts fail because they were launched too early. You got to combine data on when consumers are likely to embrace something new with your sense of timing.
That balance can make or break a launch.
Totally. And to get better at that, at timing and understanding the market, it can be really helpful to have regular strategy workshops. It's a chance to share experiences, learn from past mistakes, and sharpen your instincts for those future calls. A company that learns from every decision, whether it was a win or a loss, it becomes much more adaptable over time.
And being adaptable is so crucial in today's world.
Absolutely. We should also make sure our decision-making is aligned with our core values, right?
Oh, yeah, that's important.
We don't want our intuition leading us down a path that conflicts with our mission. There's an ethical component here. Data might show you a really profitable direction, but your gut might be saying, hold on, what about the moral implications? Addressing those concerns early on protects your reputation and helps you succeed in the long run.
So it comes back to needing a well-rounded approach, right? One that values both the numbers and the human element.
Absolutely. Bring those two together, and that's where you get real innovation and responsible growth.
Okay, let's think about how a balanced approach actually affects the results we see in our projects.
It's interesting. The projects that usually have the best outcomes are the ones where you see that balance in action. Relying too heavily on data or just gut feeling, that tends to lead to less predictable results.
So the challenge is to create a consistent way of working that includes both logical analysis and creative insight.
Exactly. And that system needs to be flexible enough to handle different situations without being too rigid. One way to do that is to hold regular reviews after projects are finished. You look at how decisions were made and, importantly, why.
Looking at decisions from both a numbers perspective and a more qualitative perspective is crucial.
Exactly. You can track the measurable outcomes, but you also want to know which intuitive judgments turned out to be valuable. That record becomes a resource for future decisions, helping you refine your intuition over time.
And sharing those findings across the company helps everyone learn and encourages them to share their own innovative ideas.
Absolutely. And if a hunch doesn't work out, well, you learn from that too. If data leads you astray, you adjust your models. Either way, you're constantly improving. You're not aiming for perfection every time. You're aiming for growth.
Creating a guideline that says when we should rely more on the data and when we should listen to our gut could also be really helpful, right?
Yeah, definitely. It provides clarity and makes sure every decision is approached with that balanced mindset. And importantly, that guideline should be a living document, something you update as you learn new things and as technology changes.
Right, because what works now might not work in the future.
Exactly. Especially in fields that are changing really fast, your intuition needs to evolve along with your data analysis skills. One way to do that is to use AI tools to look for patterns in the data and then compare those patterns to our human insights.
So AI could take care of those massive data sets, and that frees us up to do the more strategic, intuitive thinking.
Exactly. Automation can spot trends quickly, but you still need that human spark for those creative leaps. And let's not forget the value of collaboration across different departments.
Right, because getting different perspectives can really sharpen our intuition.
Absolutely. People from different backgrounds might see things that others miss. Encourage cross-team projects so that data analysts learn from designers and vice versa. That interaction can lead to breakthroughs that individual teams wouldn't find on their own.
And encouraging people to question assumptions, even if those assumptions are based on solid data, is so important.
Absolutely. It's easy to get stuck in our ways if we assume what worked before will always work. By questioning things, we stay alert, we refine our models, and we keep our intuition sharp and relevant.
It's like that saying, the only constant is change.
It is, it is. And by embracing that, by using both data analysis and gut feeling, we can be much more innovative.
Totally agree. If we respect the data, but also value those intuitive insights, we're building a really strong foundation.
We are.
And as long as we're open to learning, we'll just keep getting better at making decisions.
That's the key. Always be learning.
Absolutely. Now, how can we make sure we capture those instinctive thoughts before they slip away?
That's a great question. Those insights can be fleeting, so you need a way to record them and go back to them.
We talked about holding those short brainstorming sessions during data reviews.
Yeah. Creating that time, it gives people a chance to share those gut reactions before they get too focused on the numbers. It shows that we value those feelings.
And creating those instinct checkpoints at key points in our projects can help too.
Exactly. It reminds everyone to stop and think about their gut feelings, even if the data seems clear.
Having everyone write down their gut feelings in a shared document, that seems like a simple but effective way to track them.
It is. Documenting those impressions helps you see if any patterns emerge. You might find that some people are really good at spotting potential problems early on, even without a lot of data.
And that kind of early detection can be a huge advantage in uncertain times.
Huge. It's about recognizing that valuable insights can come from those less tangible cues, not just from the numbers. Combining analysis with those creative leaps, that's what drives innovation.
But we also need to create a culture where it's okay to be wrong when you follow your gut.
Right. That's about how we view mistakes.
Yeah.
If people are scared to be wrong, they won't share those gut feelings. We need to treat intuitive errors as learning opportunities, just like we treat analytical mistakes.
Exactly. Because sometimes you learn more from your mistakes than from your successes.
You really do. It shows you where you need to improve.
And keeping track of not just those successes, but those near misses where someone's intuition might have prevented a problem.
Yeah. Highlighting those shows how important those less formal insights are. Over time, you get a better sense of which hunches are more reliable.
It's about combining data-driven logic with those trustworthy gut feelings.
Exactly. And as you get more confident in using both, your decision-making will probably become more efficient. You'll have less back and forth.
That's the goal. But we can't get complacent and rely too much on instinct.
Absolutely not.
We always need to check those instincts against the evidence.
Right. It's about finding that balance, encouraging creativity, but also being objective.
What about getting those frontline employees involved, bringing their gut feelings into our strategy? That's an interesting idea.
It is. The people who are on the front lines every day, they often pick up on those subtle shifts in the market, sometimes even before those changes show up in the data.
Getting those firsthand observations could really help us see trends that we might miss with our high-level data analysis.
Absolutely. Plus, it makes those employees feel more valued, which is always good for morale.
And we could use a simple feedback system where they can quickly log any gut feelings they have about products or processes.
That's a great idea. Those real-time logs could help us identify problems or even creative solutions much faster than traditional reports.
But it's important that everyone knows they won't be punished for voicing a hunch that turns out to be wrong.
Absolutely. Punishing mistakes kills innovation. You want to see those missed calls as learning opportunities. And you can compare that feedback with your data to see if there are any patterns.
If you see a connection between those gut feelings and the actual numbers, that can be really useful for planning.
It can. Sometimes those untrained instincts can spot flaws that our sophisticated tools miss because they're operating within certain parameters. Human observation is more flexible.
And if those employees understand the data trends, their instincts might be even more valuable.
Definitely. Insight grows when people understand the big picture behind the numbers.
We could also run small pilot tests for ideas that come from a gut feeling. That way we can test them without taking a huge risk.
That's a great idea. Those quick trials let you fail fast if an idea doesn't work, or validate it before you invest a lot of resources. I remember one small change. It was suggested by a warehouse worker based on a hunch, and it ended up saving the company a lot of money on shipping.
That kind of practical idea, tested quickly, it can save resources and really make your customers happy.
Absolutely. If you can replicate that kind of success, you might find even more improvements that really change the game. It's about continuous exploration to make things more efficient and to stand out in the market.
What about setting up regular meetings where people from different levels can share ideas?
Oh, that's a great idea. That kind of inclusivity creates respect and ensures that leaders stay connected to those real-world challenges that frontline employees are seeing.
Sometimes we get too focused on the data from the top and don't really listen to those firsthand experiences.
Right. Combining those perspectives, it gives you a wider view and reduces blind spots. It helps you avoid groupthink.
And it creates a culture where everyone's learning, where data and intuition work together.
Well said. A company that values both logic and feeling can have breakthroughs across all departments, make it a formal process, and track its impact to ensure it's a lasting change.
Now, let's talk about personal biases and how they can affect our gut instincts.
It's a big factor. Take confirmation bias, for example. It makes us favor information that supports what we already believe, even if it's not accurate.
And that can lead us to ignore warning signs if we dismiss the numbers that don't agree with our gut.
Exactly. So you need to have structured discussions that challenge assumptions and help you uncover those hidden biases that you might not even be aware of.
It's about creating a safe space where it's okay to disagree.
Definitely. If people are afraid of being criticized, they won't point out potential flaws in an idea, especially if it's a popular idea or one that supports a gut feeling.
So we need to actively look for evidence that might contradict our gut feelings.
We do. Check different data, think of different scenarios. That can really test how strong your hunch is.
And we can use data visualization tools to highlight those unusual patterns.
Yeah, visuals can be more impactful than just looking at numbers. It helps you see trends or inconsistencies much faster. And if you see consistent conflict between your gut feeling and the data, you definitely need to investigate further.
Sometimes the data might be incomplete, or our instincts might be influenced by our biases.
Exactly. And rotating who's on decision-making panels can bring fresh perspectives to the table, reducing the impact of those ingrained viewpoints.
And it's important to remind everyone that questioning an idea isn't a personal attack. It's about making sure we're making the best possible decision.
Right. Focus on the ideas, not the people who suggested them.
There was that example where an analyst was so confident in a model that they ignored signals that it was wrong.
Oh yeah, the overconfidence trap. It can happen to anyone, especially when you're emotionally invested in an idea. Developing self-awareness and humility is key to combining data with intuition effectively.
Because humility allows us to accept that no one has all the answers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And track your decisions to see if there are any patterns of biased judgment that can help you correct course over time.
Having neutral moderators for meetings can also help ensure that everyone's ideas are evaluated fairly.
That's a good idea. It keeps the discussions balanced. It might seem like extra work, but it's definitely better than making a big decision based on flawed thinking.
Absolutely. Those careful checks can save us from making costly mistakes down the line.
They can. And ultimately, we want to create a culture where curiosity, careful examination, and thoughtful intuition are all valued equally. That kind of mindset helps you reduce bias and come up with better strategies.
So, in this unpredictable market, it's more important than ever to combine quick instinct with reliable data.
Absolutely. We need to be able to react quickly, but also make sure we're acting on good information.
If we only rely on data, we might be too slow and miss opportunities, or we might not see the risks in time.
Right. And if you only go with your gut in a volatile market, you might overreact or underreact. You won't have a solid foundation.
So we need a flexible plan that we can adapt as we get new information.
We do. Having that ongoing process means we're not stuck with old assumptions when things change.
What about having daily check-ins where teams share those new observations, the things that haven't shown up in the numbers yet?
That's a great way to stay informed and spot problems or opportunities early on. But at the same time, you need good systems for getting real-time data, so you can quickly confirm if any big trends are emerging.
So it's about mixing those immediate human insights with those quick data updates.
Exactly. If your gut tells you to change strategy, you can test that idea with some targeted research or small-scale trials. That way, you're not just guessing, you're encouraging experimentation.
And giving employees the power to share that market feedback, that can boost morale.
For sure. Often, the combined knowledge of the team is more powerful than the knowledge of just a few experts, especially when things are moving fast. But be careful about overreacting to every piece of news. Make sure you're interpreting the data correctly.
Because making impulsive decisions can be risky.
It can. You need to balance that need for speed with careful checks and balances.
Exactly. What about creating different scenarios, including both data projections and intuitive thinking about how things might play out?
That's a really good idea. It helps you prepare for different outcomes, so you're not totally blindsided by sudden changes.
And having a team that's ready to respond in a crisis is crucial.
Absolutely. Centralized coordination streamlines communication, and aligns priorities across different departments when things get tough. And it's always a good idea to look back at past periods of instability and see how data and intuition helped or hurt your response.
Those lessons from the past can be really helpful for guiding our decisions now.
They can. They show you what worked and what didn't. Often it's the small, easily overlooked details that can have a big impact. So stay alert, pay attention to those minor indicators. They can warn you about bigger changes down the line.
Bringing together data and intuition can really help us navigate those market ups and downs.
I think so. It helps you be more resilient, more adaptable, and it gives you a real edge in uncertain times.